guide. So this is more like revision because you've already done this topic by now, hopefully. So we can use this as a revision for the exam as well. Okay. For those who are new, I will just go through the rules of engagement in our sessions. So please switch off your videos and mute your microphone, and raise your virtual hand if you want to ask a question or make a comment. You are more than welcome to also use the chat to post your questions. And then I've already pasted the attendance register here in the chat. Please complete the attendance register. It is just for us to see how many students are actually attending the sessions. Then lastly, I would also ask you to complete the evaluation form at the end. So please feel free to participate. Let's make it interactive. And if you have any technical challenges, you can send your email query to the Cape Town tutorial office on this email address with your student number. Just a reminder that all the sessions are recorded and you can access the previous sessions on this YouTube playlist. The link is also here in the chat. If you scroll up in the chat, you will be able to find that link that will take you to the playlist. So today we are talking about human issues with HCI. Just to recap, last week we talked about HCI, human-computer interaction, the basics of it, because this is what this whole module is about. And we also talked about interaction design. So today we're talking about the human issues, because human-computer interaction is all about how human beings or the users interact with computers. So the outcomes for today's lesson is to understand how perception and cognition influence user interface design, understand the differences between short-term and long-term memory and how they influence interface design. We will also talk about the physical attributes of users that can affect how they interact with computers, and we will also discuss the assignments. I believe you had an assignment that was due this week, so we can also talk about that. So I'm not going to go through the topics in detail. I'll only cover the important concepts that you need to understand. So for the detail, you can go read your study guide, lesson 2, to get the details. Okay. Then just before we get started, let's check our knowledge. The first question is just to see your understanding of where you are with the module. So the first question is asking, interface design reduces load on STM by using. STM stands for short-term memory. So which option is correct? Is it by using prompts on display, or B, small lines on display, or C, different colors on display? You can select your answer and put it in the chat. Whichever answer you think is the most correct, Okay, I see someone said A, then they deleted their answer. M. Odoni says A also. Prompt on display. So that is correct. So interface design reduces the load on short-term memory by using prompts on display. So if you can just imagine the interfaces that you use. Last week we talked about graphical user interfaces. So a lot of times the prompts on the screen guides you on what you need to do next without having to think too much about it. So that is what this question is referring to. And then number 2, forgot my password button that prompts with a question is an example of A, knowledge in the head, B, knowledge in the world, or C, knowledge in short-term memory. I'm sure when you're using different apps or websites, you've seen an option where just below the login, there's usually a button for forgot my password where you can click on it to reset your password. So the question here is asking, is this an example of knowledge in the head, knowledge in the world, or knowledge in the short-term memory? Option C, knowledge in the short-term memory. Others, what do you say? Okay, I see we have conflicting answers. Someone says A, someone says B, someone says C. Okay, so let's leave this one. We'll come back to it later on at the end once we have gone through the slides. So remember this one, forgot my password. We will come back to it. So just to recap what human-computer interaction is. So HCI is the study of interaction between human beings or users and computers. So this is the basic definition that you need to understand so that you are able to answer questions related to human-computer interaction. As long as you understand that it is the study of interaction between human beings and computers, then it's easier for you to apply what you're learning. Then we said that this interaction is achieved via an interface. We spoke about different types of interfaces, voice interfaces. We spoke about command line interfaces, graphical user interfaces. So all of those enable us as users to interact with computers. Then how it is about how people interact with computers and other digital technologies. So we learned that HCI as a field is not only rooted in information technology or in computer science, It also includes other fields like psychology, design, language, etc., to make sure that all aspects that affects human beings interacting with computers are addressed. So this field of HCI is focused on studying and improving the factors that influence the use of computers. So that is just a recap. And then we also spoke about examples of HCI in the modern world. So mobile applications, all the apps that you have on your phone, that is an example of HCI. So if you can just think about all the apps that you use and how the interfaces are designed. That is what we are studying about. Virtual assistants, we gave examples of Google Assistant and Siri. Then we also talked about video games. It's a form of HCI. Social media, it's also a form of HCI. We spoke a lot about Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of those. Then we also have wearable technology, the smart watches, and VR, the VR goggles. That is wearable technology. E-commerce, where users can buy things over the internet, whether it is via the websites or via apps like the Mr. Mr. D app, where you can order food, or any other type of e-commerce, whether you're buying groceries through the various grocery apps like the Checker 6061 or the Pick and Pay app. That is a form of HCI. Then we also spoke about ATMs as an example of an interface that humans are using to interact with computers. So with ATMs, when you go to the ATM, it does not look like you are interacting with a computer. So that is a design process that happened. We also talked about the design process last week, so that when you as a banking customer go to the ATM, you just need to read what is on screen and it prompts you on what to do next. So maybe when you get to the ATM, it shows a message to insert your card. After you insert your card, then the next step it will ask you to put in your PIN code. Then after that, you get another menu which shows you different transactions that you can choose from. So that is a form of HCI. So there are many other things that we use on a daily basis. As long as you are interacting with a computer or some form of electronic system, that is also human-computer interaction. Okay, so for today's topic, human issues in HCI, we are focusing on the issues that affect how people interact with computers. So this is mainly how human beings process information when they interact with the system. So the first one is perception. Perception basically means using our senses to detect information. So the way that users detect information in their environment, that is called perception. So there are many factors that affect perception. Change in output, maybe in size or in loudness if it is a sound output. So let's say maybe you are looking on a screen, and then the size of the text becomes very small. So let's say the buttons and the icons are a certain size that is easily visible and readable by the user. And then all of a sudden, when you go to the next screen, then the text is very small. So that affects your perception as a user. Or if it is a sound output, whether something becomes too loud or too soft, that also changes your perception as a user. Then we also have the maximum and minimum detectable levels. That is also referring to sound. The field of perception. Can the user see the display? That one is very important, because when we design interfaces, we need to make sure that interfaces are accessible by all kinds of users, even for users with visual impairments, etc. So we need to keep that in mind. Another factor is fatigue or circadian rhythms. As a human being, when you are tired, you perceive information differently. So, simple example, if you try to study when you are tired, you will not be able to understand what you're studying. You might even fall asleep. But if you are studying early in the morning, you are still fresh, then you perceive the information better. So this is what it is referring to. Background noise. If there is background noise, then it also affects our perception of how we detect information. Other things that can be a factor is things like partial sight or aging, people who have got eye problems, or that also affect the perception of information, or aging, that is also a factor. Then there's also people who have got color blindness. Color blindness means that someone is not able to perceive the different colors, or they're not able to differentiate between, let's say, different shades of blue, as an example. So that can also reduce the visual effectiveness for certain color combinations on interfaces. So that all affects perception. Are there any questions on perceptions before I go further? No questions. Okay. So I spoke about the partial sight and aging, and then there are aspects of color that influence how the color is perceived. So here they talk about the color hue, which refers to the variety, tint, or the quality of a color. So we know that we can have a color blue, but it has got different types of blue. You have got a light blue, a navy blue, a royal blue. Same with colors like green, or even red. So this is the attribute of color by which a person recognize that color as red or as green, depending on the intensity of the color. So all of this affects our perception on how we perceive and detect information. Color lightness, how much light appears to be reflected from a surface in relation to nearby surfaces. So interface designers must take this into account when designing interfaces. Lightness is the most important attribute in making contrast more effective. People with color deficits have difficulty discriminating colors based on lightness. So maybe you probably have noticed that most of them interfaces don't use very bright colors. If it is a green, it will be a soft green, or if it is a gray color, it is a soft gray, so that the icons and the text is more visible to the user. So that is color lightness. Then we have got color saturation, which is another factor, the degree of intensity of a color. It is associated with the color's perceptual difference from white, black, or gray. So that is how it also affects the intensity. So all of these factors affect how human beings perceive information on the interfaces that we design. Then the next factor is cognition. Remember, we're talking about human issues in HCI. So cognition is the way that we process information. Perception is the way that we detect information using our senses, be it sight, hearing, touch. That is perception. But cognition is the way that we process that information. So cognition involves short-term processing of information, long-term memory and learning, things like problem solving, decision making, attention. Attention simply means the process of concentrating on something for some time. If you are able to pay attention to something for 10 minutes, concentrating on that one thing, that is attention. And it is also influenced by the way that information is presented on the interface, as well as the user's goal, what they want to do on the interface. So attention is an important one. Then cognition also talks about search and scanning. When users want to something specific from an interface, they don't necessarily go through the whole thing. They just search for the one thing that they want to do. Then we also have time perception, which also affects how we process information. So the main topics that you need to know here is the topic of memory, We have short-term memory and long-term memory. So short-term memory refers to information that is retained automatically and retrieved without effort. So let's say information like your date of birth, you know that without having to think a lot, or maybe your address where you live. That is information that is in the short-term memory, and you can retain that information easily, and you don't have to work hard to remember that information. So we also have grouping of information into meaningful sections. So probably when you're studying, you have used some form of abbreviation or a song to memorize what you're studying. So that is chunking information, grouping information together into a chunk to make it more meaningful and easier to remember. So short-term memory also involves mnemonics, acronyms to help the user recall additional detail. I know a lot of students use acronyms to memorize. So that is also short-term memory. But for studying purposes, it can also be a disadvantage, because if you forget one, then you forget the whole thing. So yeah, but that is short-term memory. One thing about memory is that it is fragile. If you get distracted, then the stuff in the short-term memory disappears. So this is what happens. If you have memorized something, let's say you're going to write a test, you memorize something, and if you get distracted, then that information disappears because it is stored in the short-term memory. So short-term memory has low capacity, fast access, and a short retention period. So that is why you'll see that things that you memorize after the exam, probably you won't even remember. So it has a short retention period. We should design interfaces that make efficient use of short-term memory. So that is why most interfaces prompt the user to direct them on what to do, so that the user does not have to think long and hard while using the interface. So using prompting is one of the ways that interface designers make efficient use of short-term memory. Still on short-term memory, users should only be required to remember a few items of information. So simple things that you need to remember. Maybe you need to remember your username or remember your student number. That's all you need to remember. To support short-term memory by representing additional information on display, it is important for user interface design to reduce the load on short-term memory. We can do this by recording information in the world and not in the head. This means that we put information on the computer system so that the user does not have to think hard to retrieve that information. So the example of forgot my password, where you would click there and it asks you a question. So most apps or websites, when you register for the first time, They will ask you for a password reset question that only you would know the answer to. So maybe a question like, who was your grade 1 teacher? The name of your grade 1 teacher, or something like your mother's maiden name. Only you would be able to answer those type of questions. So you can set a password reminder question. Then they will know that it is you resetting the password. Okay. Then we come to long-term memory. This one is exactly the opposite of short-term memory. So it has high capacity, meaning that it can store large amounts of information, slower to access, and a long retention period. So it takes time to put stuff away in long-term memory and time and effort to get it out again. So things that take you a long time to practice, let's say solving math problems as an example. It is a skill that you build over time, and the more you practice, the more that skill is embedded in your brain. Then when you encounter a similar problem, you know you can retrieve the strategy that you need to apply from the long-term memory. How well we recover knowledge from long-term memory is dependent on how the material was interpreted in the first place. This is why understanding is most important. What is stored in long-term memory under one interpretation probably can be found later when sought under some other interpretation. There is no practical limit to long-term memory, and the difficulty with long-term memory is organizing the information. So capacity is not an issue, but organizing that information so that it makes sense and figuring out a way to retrieve that information in a way that it makes sense. That is the difficulty with long-term memory. So when the material does not make sense, it has to be worked on, it has to be structured and interpreted until it can be retained. I hope that makes sense. So you need to understand the differences between short-term memory and long-term memory as a way that human beings process information, because cognition is an important factor when we talk about human issues in HCI. So perception is the way that we detect information in the environment. Cognition is the way that we process that information. So just make sure that you understand the two. Then still on long-term memory, I did speak about this, that storage and retrieval is easier when the material is organized in a way that makes sense. Okay, then we have the concept of knowledge in the world versus knowledge in the head. If this is too small, you can just zoom in. So knowledge in the head, knowledge in the world. So we said earlier that knowledge in the world means that we store that knowledge in the computer system. Knowledge in the head means that the user knows that information. It's information that they can that only the user knows about. So that is information in the head. So we need to differentiate these two in terms of their properties. Let me just put this table here so that it's easy to see for you guys. I'm putting it here in the chat. Maybe it's more visible, then you can just click on the image so that you're able to read. So we need to differentiate between these two in terms of their properties, retrievability, learning, efficiency of use, and ease of use at first encounter, and also aesthetics. So aesthetics is how something looks, whether it is elegant or cluttered, that is aesthetics. So the property of retrievability. So knowledge in the world is easy to retrieve whenever it is visible or audible, depending on availability in the environment. So when the user interface prompts the user, please enter your PIN number, or please select the transaction you want to do, or on the screen you can just select display balance on the ATM or print statement, for example. Then it is easy to retrieve. Knowledge in the head, it is more difficult to retrieve because it requires memory, search, or reminding. Something like a PIN number, it is knowledge in the head because the user must remember that PIN number. The property of learning, with knowledge in the head, learning is not required, only interpretation. So with knowledge in the world, you just need to read the prompts on the screen. You don't need to have prior knowledge. As long as you can read, understand that information, be able to interpret it, then you are able to interact with that interface. Whereas with knowledge in the head, to get information, it requires learning, which can be considerable. So that is for knowledge in the head. With efficiency of use, knowledge in the world tends to be slowed up by the need to find and interpret the external sources to make it more efficient, but knowledge in the head can be very efficient because the user will know exactly what it is that they require. So ease of use at first encounter. Knowledge in the world makes it very easy to use because the user can just follow the prompts on screen. That's why even when a 3-year-old opens an app like CocoMelon, for example, they don't even know how to read, but they can interact with the app and play games, play songs or whatever. So knowledge in the world, ease of use is high, but knowledge in the head, ease of use is low. Then aesthetics. Knowledge in the world can be unaesthetic or inelegant, especially if there's a need to maintain a lot of information. This can lead to clutter and it requires a skilled designer. So this is where UX designers come in to design interfaces that are easy on the eye, meaning that it flows logically, it is not cluttered. We spoke about colors earlier, that they use the right colors that don't distract the user. So it is important for knowledge in the world to pay attention to the design of the interface. Well, with knowledge in the head, nothing needs to be visible, which gives the designer more freedom. Do you guys have any questions on this? Okay, if no questions, then that means you understand, it makes sense. Okay, so an example that they give in your study guide about these two things is these two screens from a long time ago. You can clearly see that Windows doesn't look like this anymore. So the box on the left-hand side is an example pop-up that comes when after you're doing spell check in Microsoft Word. So the pop-up message just says the spelling check is complete. Text set to no proofing was skipped. To find no proofing text, click Edit, Replace, click More, click Format, click Language, and choose No Proofing. So the way that this message is designed, it is not an efficient use because we can see that the user will need to do multiple steps to get to what they need to do. So now the user must remember, after they click on this message, they must remember that I have to go and click text. I must then click edit, replace, or click more. So as an interface designer, they were supposed to just put the buttons on the message to say spelling check is complete, and then to find text, then they put the button for edit and replace. Then the next screen, put another button for formatting, etc. So that is the role that memory plays in HCI. So here we can see the meaning of efficiency of use, that with knowledge in the world, it is slowed up by the need to find and interpret information. Whereas with knowledge in the head, it can be very efficient. So if you look at the other box on the right-hand side, this is a typical password reset screen. So if a user forgot their password, then they click forgot my password, then it would bring up this screen and the password reset question that the user has set up in the beginning when they created their account. So in this case, the question is, who was my sixth grade teacher? Then the user would know the answer. So that answer is an example of knowledge in the head, because this type of functionality, it is something that the user can easily remember without having to think very hard. Can you guys give some examples where you have seen this before? Whether it is the password reset or any pop-up messages that you have seen, and how it affects the role of memory or ease of use when you are interacting with the interface. Anyone who wants to try? You guys are very quiet today. So in user interface design, it is very important that the interface is from the user on what they need to do next, and that it is clear on the screen. So let's take the example of a online ordering system as an example. So whether you're ordering on the website or maybe at a self-service terminal, like what they have these days at the fast food places like at McDonald's or at KFC, when you get to that screen, already you don't have to think hard. You just read what is on the screen. Then you select things from the menu that you want to buy. Then you add them to your order. It prompts you on the screen. Then it asks you, would you like to add other items to your order? You click yes or no. Then you select other items if you want to. You can even change the quantity. If you want two of something, you can change the quantity. Then when you are done, you can you click checkout. Then it tells you, read the message, the display of the card machine. So then as a user, you read the instruction there, whether you must tap your card to pay or insert your card, whatever it is. So that is an example of how they're using memory in ACI. So you can see that that type of interface requires very little effort from the user. So they make it easier and efficient for anyone to be able to use that interface, because it doesn't require any prior knowledge. So you don't have to learn how to use that type of interface, as long as you are able to read or even look at the pictures. You can be able to use the interface. So that type of knowledge in the world, it is easy to retrieve because it is easily visible to the user. And even if it is the first time you are using that interface, you are not going to struggle because it is designed in a way that it is easy to use, and the way that it looks like the normal menu that a customer would be familiar with if they've been to a McDonald's before. It looks exactly the same. It has the same look and feel. So the aesthetics are also important in how we present knowledge in the world to the user. So that is just an example. You can think of others. Okay. So if you guys don't have any other examples, we can go to our practice questions. So the first question, the human in human-computer interaction is defined as including option A, whoever is trying to accomplish something using the technology, or B, an individual user, C, a group of users working together, or D, a sequence of users. In an organization, which of these options do you think is the correct answer? The human in human-computer interaction. What does it refer to? You can just choose your answer and put it here in the chat. I'll give you a minute to think about this one. Okay, I see two people are saying option A. Whoever is trying to accomplish something using the technology. That is correct. So that is the human in HCI. Next, which factors affect perception? Earlier we spoke about perception. So which factors affect perception? The field of perception, background noise, fatigue and circadian rhythms, or change in output. Okay, which factors affect perception? Field of perception, background noise, fatigue, and circadian rhythm change in output. I think it is all of the above. When we discuss perception in the slides, we listed the factors which affect perception. Change in output was one of them. Field of perception was one of them. Background noise, and also the one about fatigue and circadian rhythm. So it is all of the above, but we don't have an option for all of the above, but all of them are correct. So Azania, even when you're saying B and C, they are correct. So this question should have an option for all of the above, because all of these are factors that affect perception. Okay, good. Then question 3, which of the following factors influence a user's experience when interacting with a system? Which of the following factors influence a user's experience when interacting with a system? Is it A, the user's personality type, cultural background, memory capacity, or previous experience? You can select the answer that you think is correct there. Azania says D. Previous experience. Yes, it influences the user's experience when interacting with a system. But this question is not clear. In your study guide, they also talk about culture as one of the factors. I'm just trying to find it. What is the section? That talks about culture. So they say behavior typical of a group or a class of people. So this can be customary behaviors or assumptions or pattern of thinking or style of communication. That can also affect so things like the images that are used on the interface. or certain colors. So that can also affect the user experience based on the cultural background. So B and D influences the user's experience when interacting with the system. I just want to see if I can open the guide, because there is also other information on the guide about the physiological factors, which I did not discuss today. Let me quickly get it. Okay. I will show you guys in a moment. So I also have a list of structured questions that you can go and do in your own time when you're doing revision, to make sure that you understand the topics for this lesson too. So I will give you guys the slides, then you can use these questions for revision. So I wanted to show the study guide. I think you are still using the same one from years ago. Sharing. So is this the same one that you guys are using? So this is the one that I'm working from. So lesson 2 is talking about cognitive psychology. That is where we spoke about perception and cognition. Then they also talk about the physiology as one of the human issues, culture, personality and gender, age, expertise, and then errors that people make. So these are the different topics that you need to be familiar with. Oh, you can click to just go there. Okay. So we spoke about cognition and perception, but if you go further down, we discuss knowledge in the head, knowledge in the world, physiology, which refers to our physical human body, and how it affects how we interact with computers. So visual displays refers to monitors or screens. In this case, they need to be at a correct visual angle to the user.
Awunantloni awuzithandi ulibele ndizokuphuza ke namhlanje.
Sorry about that. I muted you, Azania. So, um, physical interaction in the environment. We also need to know about the keyboard and mouse, that prolonged periods of data entry places stress on the wrists. Maybe you've experienced this if you've been typing for a long time or working on the computer for a long time, then um, you have pain on the wrist. Same with using mobile phones. If you are always on the phone typing, there is this thing called carpal tunnel syndrome, which causes pain or numbness on the wrists and here on the joints of the finger. Usually you would feel it maybe on the thumb. So that is actually um, a problem that is caused by prolonged use of things like keyboard or mouse or even the mobile devices. Chairs and office furniture. So you've probably heard of the term ergonomics before. It is how as users we need to make sure that we are sitting in a certain way to promote good posture. Have a chair that supports your lower back so that you don't get back pain and things like that. Placement of work material. It is important that users operate um, their system in conjunction with other sources. So how a user organizes their desk so that they don't have neck problems, back problems caused by looking at different ways. Um, so these days, most people use a laptop stand to raise the screen to an eye level so that they don't constantly have to be facing down. So that is physiology. Then other sources of distraction in a work environment can be the noise. We spoke about noise. Light, bright lighting can distract users. And there's also myths or urban myths about the impact of computer systems on human physiology, like eyesight. Most people say computers damage your eyesight. Um, Others also say it causes epilepsy attacks, but that is just a myth. Radiation also is also another myth. But as a rule of thumb, do not make interface objects so small that they cannot be selected by a user in a hurry. So that's what you need to know. And you can also read this section 2.3.2 about users with disability, because it's important to make sure that when we design interfaces, we comply with regulations and legal requirements to accommodate all types of users. So this section is also important. Then you will go to the section about users with vision impairment. They like to ask questions like this in the assignments and exams. People with motor impairments. And then 2.4, it's about culture. So you can also read about this. So they're saying how a person was raised affects how they view interfaces differently. So here they give an example of someone who grew up reading Japanese or Chinese versus someone who grew up reading English or Afrikaans. So users from different cultures perceive interfaces differently. And then you can go read about that. Personality and gender is another one that they can ask about. Age, this one is important to understand how users of different ages have different preferences in how they interact with computers. So, example, young children versus the elderly people. So maybe you can see in this picture a young child interacting with a robot, and we have games that are interfaces designed to help children to learn. But if you give that type of an interface to an elderly person, it is not going to be appealing to them. So for designers, they need to take note of certain limitations when designing interfaces for children, evolving dexterity, meaning the mouse dragging, double clicking, cannot always be used. Imaging literacy, meaning that written instructions will not be effective for children because some of them are only still learning to read. So it's better to use pictures for interfaces that are meant for children. Low level of abstraction, meaning that complex sequences must be avoided unless the child is using the application under adult supervision, and short attention span. So those are some of the important things you need to focus on. Same with the elderly, how aging affects how adult users interact with interfaces. So you can go and read about that. The section about expertise, it is not important. I have not seen a question about that, but they like to ask questions about sleeps. So 2.8, the errors that people make, you need to go and read that section. So sleeps are observable errors and that result from automatic behavior. So a person had the right goal, but they performed an incorrect action. So that is called a sleep. Then they will ask you the different types, the different kinds of sleeps. You must know that there are capture errors, description errors, and what each of them are, and be able to identify the examples. Mode errors, data-driven errors, all of those, you need to understand the different kinds of sleeps. So I think that is all about human issues that you need to understand. Then this is the end of the lesson. So yeah, you can go read those sections that I did not cover for your own understanding. Okay. Do you guys have any questions on this topic? No questions? In terms of the assignment, how did the assignment go? The assessment for that you were doing this week? Any feedback on that one? Okay. So the exam dates are not out yet. So we will continue with the lessons. And next week we will do lesson 3 for INF1520. And then when we know the exam dates, I will book in some time to do exam preparation just so that you guys know what to prepare for the exam, not only the content, but the do's and don'ts of writing online exams, all the important information that you need to know. So I will make sure that I make time to go through that with you. But it is already a bit late. I don't know why the timetable is taking so long. But yeah, anyway, there is nothing that we can do. We just need to wait. So hopefully in the next week or so, they will